This is a narrated version of Chapter 18, Psychopathy and Sadism. Psychopathy and Sadism. Psychopathy and sadism are offender classifications that are behaviorally determined. The diagnosis of psychopathy or sadism is largely dependent on behavioral evidence. Psychopathy. Psychopathy is a personality disorder evidenced by a distinctive cluster of behavioral and inferred personality traits defined by Hare Psychopathic Checklist, revised. A psychopath refers to a social predator diagnosed with psychopathy who often charms and manipulates his or her way through life. Psychopaths are completely lacking in conscience and in feeling for others. They take what they want and do as they please without the slightest sense of guilt or regret. Psychological, biological, and generic factors have contributed to the development of the syndrome as well as social and early life experiences. A sociopath is used to describe the same behavior manifestation and inferred personality traits, except that sociopaths have a syndrome forced entirely by social forces and early experiences. The psychopathic characteristics, the distinctive cluster of behaviors and inferred personality traits that Hare is referring to, are found in the Hare Revised Psychopathic Checklist revised. Characteristics include the following: lack of empathy, conning, manipulative, criminal versatility, failure to accept responsibility for actions, glib and superficial charm, grandiose self-of-worth, impulsivity, lack of remorse or guilt, poor behavioral controls, early behavioral problems, irresponsibility, and juvenile delinquency. Lack of realistic long-term goals, many short-term marital relationships, need for stimulation, proneness to boredom, pathological lying, parasitic lifestyle, promiscuous sexual behavior, revocation of conditional release, shallow affect. All psychopaths are not equal. By extension, all psychopathic behavior is not equal. Psychopathic behavior exists on a continuum. The presence of one characteristic is not itself proof of psychopathy. It is only when the traits cluster together in an enduring and intense fashion that psychopathy becomes a possibility. Motivation. While motivated by the same things as other criminals, the psychopath can use brutal and exploitive methods that can be carried out in the absence of any remorse whatsoever. Psychopaths are not encumbered by distress, empathy, or remorse. Sadistic behavior. Sadism refers to the intentional infliction of psychological or physical suffering on a conscious victim able to experience pain or humiliation for the purpose of the offender's sexual gratification. The definition can be broken down into three components. 1. The intentional infliction of psychological or physical suffering on a conscious victim who is able to experience pain and or humiliation. 2. The infliction of such suffering over a period of time to support an inference that the suffering was inflicted intentionally and that the offender was sexually aroused by it. And 3. The association of the intentional infliction of suffering with the offender's sexual arousal or gratification. Misunderstandings of the origins of the term have led to its confusion as a synonym for lust murder, which is any sexually motivated homicide. This has led to misclassification of many high-profile offenders as sadistic and the incorrect assumption that certain behaviors are inherently sadistic. Sadistic behavior. Generalized behavioral assumptions. Rape. If the act involves in a particular rape are used as torture over time to humiliate the victim, cause suffering, especially to sexually arouse the offender, then a reasonable argument for their classification as sadistic can be made. Anal assault. It is true that some offender, for the purpose of servicing their own sexual gratification, insert objects into a victim's rectum in order to witness their suffering. However, this behavior also services anger retaliatory motivations. Strangulation. Some offenders may engage in strangulation in order to bring the victim in and out of consciousness, achieving sexual gratification from the victim's intermittent suffering responses. However, some offenders employ strangulation not for fantasy, but for function. Biting. Motivations for biting a victim's skin include sadistic pleasure, but can also include punishment or anger motivation and defensive actions. Killing the victim. Killing the victim is not evidence of sadism. Sadists would want to keep their victims alive and conscious as long as possible in order to continue their gratification from the suffering. Killing the victim in front of another victim. Homicide may be precautionary in nature to rid the offender of a living witness. In such a case, any suffering experienced by the living victim is secondary to the offender's motives. Post-mortem mutilation. Unconscious or deceased victims cannot give a sadist the type of feedback required for sexual arousal. Post-mortem acts or acts committed on the unconscious victim cannot be accurately described as sadistic. This ends this narrated version of this PowerPoint presentation.